This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 330 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. This time we're talking about 2025 travel trends and resolutions for the new year. Firstly, I'd like to pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, where I'm recording this podcast today in a very hot summer. And of course, once you're recording a podcast, the fan has to go off because that's too noisy. So you can't hear or feel this over the airwaves, but it's sweaty in here. Anyway, enough of that. In this episode, I want to do a quick review of travel for me in 2024 and then look ahead to 2025 plans and trends, what's going on around the world. And I also want to share some travel resolutions that a bunch of my wonderful listeners have sent in for me. So first of all, a very quick look back on the year that was 2024. I'm recording this in mid-December. It was a pretty horrible year. It started, as you might recall, with the sudden and honestly quite traumatic loss of my mum, very unexpected. And it didn't really get all that much better from there. That impacted all of the year. So I know you have had fewer podcasts to listen to than usual, and my apologies, but it seems to be back on track. So during 2024, I didn't do heaps of travel. I had one interstate work trip to speak at the Trav Media Summit, and that was notable especially because of the really immensely kind support from so many friends in travel media and travel PR. Of course, it was the first trip I'd made after my mum passed. So that was fabulous. I won't name everyone who helped me so beautifully for fear of leaving someone out, but I so appreciated you all. And I will give a special biggest shout out to Flip and the Burns family who took me in when I couldn't get accommodation the night after the conference, thanks to a certain Taylor Swift being in town. I know many Swifties were travelling and I was the victim of them all being around, but fair enough. It all worked out and I had a fabulous time with Flip, so thank you. Apart from that, I did have the usual few work trips within Western Australia. It's always so lovely to get out of the city. Nowhere new this year, but some great return visits. And I did have 2 trips abroad, but for a change, both of them were personal and non-work related and just me and my teenage son. And in fact, actually both related to the same people. Firstly, we took off to the UK to be there for the wedding of our dear friend Cham to Nick. And then just more recently, we went to Hong Kong to visit Cham and Nick where they now live. And you can hear more about those trips. Episode 326 is a trip report about our UK trip, and episode 328 about Hong Kong. So that was 2024, but I am sure that 2025 will be significantly better in lots of ways. 25 is my lucky number. I have heaps of exciting podcast plans. Many of them are left over from early last year when, you might remember, I got as far as introducing my gorgeous new artwork. Thank you, Joe. But then life intervened. So 2025 will be when I take up all those plans again. Also, sometime during 2025, the total downloads will tick over to 1 million, which seems pretty exciting and worth celebrating. Now, I don't actually have any concrete travel plans for 2025 yet, which is unusual, but I trust that they will evolve. I have lots of ideas, but just nothing booked, nothing exactly planned. So watch this space. However, I have been paying attention to what everyone else says will be happening in 2025 in travel. It's at this time of year, every travel media outlet is full of stories about, the top 10 places to travel in 2025, etc. I am not usually a fan of those lists, but out of curiosity, I did go through, I don't know how many, 30-ish of them perhaps, and I tallied some of the top places that were mentioned. I did note that a lot of the articles were sort of suggesting places that were less travelled, but sort of not. It was a bit of a mix, but I did find 5 destinations that were repeatedly mentioned, that really got the most number of tally marks, as I read, and they were Thailand, South Africa, Japan, especially Osaka, because Osaka is hosting the World Expo in 2025, Greenland, to my surprise in a way, even though I really want to go there, and various parts of Indonesia. Of course, there were also a lot of mentions of France, Italy, Greece, and Australia, actually, in publications from outside of Australia. Most of them did sort of mention lesser known areas, but I still think perhaps those countries have enough tourists and we can find some other places to go. That's my personal opinion, but who knows where I'll end up. In particular for Australians, I found plenty of research that suggested that our most travelled places currently are Japan, Vietnam and Indonesia. Of course, a lot of the travelled Indonesia is to Bali, but hopefully to some more diverse places as well. And definitely anecdotally, I can confirm that many of my friends this year have been to Japan or Vietnam or Indonesia or more than one of those. So Japan is definitely just becoming that place that I always thought it would be when I lived there 20 years ago and hardly any Australians would visit. So last year, the 12 months to October 2023, tourism was already up massively. But then in the 12 months until October 2024, travel to Japan by Australians was up another 75%. So absolutely crazy, but understandable. I will leave a link in the show notes to a couple of destination articles that I thought had some really interesting places on them. Condé Nast's 25 places to go and Afar's list of places to go in 2025. I thought, these are actually really interesting lists. So I will put those in the show notes if you're curious. Now, it is, of course, not just about places where people go that comes into the 2025 trends or travel trends in any year. And it was super interesting that many of the articles I found really were talking about people wanting to avoid the crowds, to get around over tourism, and quite a few mentioning that more people are interested these days in various kinds of experiential travel. So, having experiences, ways to connect with other people while you travel, maybe traveling a little more slowly or staying longer in fewer places. I know I've had a few personal wins with friends this year, more than one, who've asked my advice on their trip plans, and they already know I'm probably going to tell them to stay in places for longer and go to fewer places, but they've actually been taking this advice on board. I'm very thrilled that thoughtful travel is starting to be more mainstream, both in the media and amongst my friends who didn't really think about it before. So I thought that's interesting, and I did read in a CNBC article, which was very mainstream, and they mentioned that after the kind of revenge travel of the post-pandemic year or two, now people are trying to be in those lesser-known places, have a more relaxing trip and more quote-unquote authentic. I don't really like that word, but you know what I mean. So anyway, who knows? I'll believe it all when I actually see, crowds dropping at the Eiffel Tower and in Venice, etc. But it's great that people are at least talking about this more. So we're getting there. Now, to round out 2024 and get us thinking about the year ahead, I asked people in my Thoughtful Travellers groups on Facebook and LinkedIn to let me know what their travel resolutions were for 2025. And I said it can be, anything from the places you think you'll go or any way that you think you might travel differently. And I got some fabulous answers. So here's the first one from Carolyn.
Hi, Amanda. It's Carolyn here from holidaystoSwitzerland.com. My travel resolution for 2025 is to visit in a season when I don't normally visit. Typically, I visit Switzerland during the summer. This year, I'm actually also having a winter trip, which is pretty exciting. But next year, I would like to visit during the autumn. It's a less busy season, but there's still plenty of things to see and do. And it will be great to perhaps have a little bit more of a more authentic experience when it's not so crowded in all the most popular locations. And, of course, I'll be visiting some of the lesser-known destinations as well. Happy New Year to you.
So already there we are. Thanks, Carolyn, for that. It's great to hear that you're thinking about going in different times of the year, and I think that will mean you have different and equally wonderful experiences. My teenager is currently in Switzerland. I'm very jealous. He's there with his father and auntie and cousins, etc. His auntie and family live in Switzerland, so he is sending me pictures of a snowy, cold winter while I'm here sweltering in the heat. He has picked the right time of year to go, I must say. Now, my next contribution comes from a long-time friend of the podcast, Anuj.
My 2025 travel goal is to make every journey meaningful. I'm committed to traveling responsibly by respecting local culture, reducing waste, and supporting local businesses. I also want to step outside my comfort zone by trying new activities and connecting with people from different backgrounds. I plan to embrace slow travel, taking my time to truly enjoy the journey and focus on quality experience over quantity. Most importantly, I want to follow my passion by visiting the places that I grew up watching on TV and bringing those childhood memories to life.
I love that, and I want to say ditto. That's pretty much exactly how I want to travel in 2025 as well. Love it. Now, my next contribution comes from my dear friend Julie Jones of Have Wheelchair Will Travel, and she compares how her travel turned out in 2024 to how she wants to do things differently next year.
In 2024, I fell into the trap of researching my travel through YouTube and TikTok and Instagram. And what I found through that is that everywhere is full of tourists that are doing exactly the same thing, taking away totally from the experience of feeling like I'm discovering somewhere new or different or exciting. And the over-touristing of those places just really turns me off. So in 2025, I am going back to old-fashioned guidebooks and blogs and other ways, and hoping to avoid some of those areas that are just oversaturated with people because it is the in thing on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube.
Absolutely agree, Julie, and I can't wait to see where travelling takes you in 2025. It was exciting to be able to catch up with you and your family here recently when you came to visit Western Australia. Now, curiously, a couple of my contributions came from people who have had thoughts about travel impacted by the political situation in the US. First up, a quick message from Michelle.
Definitely not America with Trump running the country.
Hi, Amanda. This is Michael Jensen from Brent and Michael Are Going Places, and don't really have any New Year's resolutions, but there are two things this year that we're doing, one really good and one not so good. And the first one is hopefully we're going to be going to Japan in the fall, something we wanted to do for a long time, and actually are looking to do some of the walks that you've covered before on your podcast. Those sounded absolutely fantastic. The other thing we're doing is this is all supposed to be a year of Asia, but instead we're going to be going back to Europe this summer, because given the outcome of the election in the United States, we have decided it's very unlikely that we are ever going to live permanently in the United States again. So we are going to spend time scouting out Spain, as we think either there or Italy is the countries that we're going to settle in. So that's our 2025.
I must confess, one of the first things I said when Trump won the election was I said to my son, oh, well, there goes any plans of ours to visit the States in the next few years. I might rescind that because I do have lots of dear friends there and lots of places I want to see. So who knows? But I certainly understand the sentiment, and got to say, I'm glad that I have a home here in Australia. Speaking of friends around the world, my next contribution comes from my dear friend, the Barefoot Backpacker, who we caught up with in Manchester on our UK trip earlier this year. And they have some interesting ideas and plans ahead for 2025.
I do have some trips already planned in, including going to a couple of places that were on my anti-bucket list a few years back. So maybe one of my travel resolutions is to ignore all previous instructions and just roll with it. Apart from that, I don't think I have any plans to change my travel concepts. I am, the barefoot backpacker, so maybe I should wear shoes less. And I've no plans to pivot to cruising or luxury travel, be sure of that. I do have one resolution though, and that's content driven rather than travel driven. I mean, I need to promote myself more anyway, that's a given, but I do feel who I am is important. Like, there's very few arrow-ace non-binary Generation X travel writers out there viewing things through those lenses, and there's no reason why I can't be a trailblazer in that market.
I could not agree more. There's so much space and need in travel media for more diverse voices. So I look forward to reading, watching, hearing the results of that resolution. Now, in the Thoughtful Travellers Facebook group, Celeste left a message about her plans for 2025. Unfortunately, after buying a very cool truck camper, she did send me some pictures, during 2024, then they had a very looked forward to trip that was cancelled due to 2 hurricanes. So hopefully better luck in 2025. She said they have some camping reservations steps away from the beach in the spring near St. Augustine in Florida, which claims to be the oldest city in the US. So that sounds pretty cool. She also says she wants to camp on national forest land instead of campgrounds. I can imagine that's like one step more beautiful. They've been slowly modifying their camper and acquiring what they need to be off-grid, which is pretty cool. And she said, it's our first RV. We've had a big learning curve on how to use everything, how to get it on and off the truck, maintenance, repairs, etc. Sounds pretty interesting though. And this is my favourite part. Celeste says, I was greatly inspired by a podcast Amanda did with someone who wrote a book about travelling local. There is so much to see in the US that I haven't seen, and I'm lucky to live in a swathe of national forest and a national park. So I hope that your travel luck is much better, Celeste, in 2025. No hurricane interruptions. Now, my final contribution comes from the lovely Margaret, and it's funny because I had an almost identical conversation with my dad just a couple of days ago, as he is in his mid to late 80s, let's call it, and has a similar scenario as Margaret describes here, which is impacting his travel resolutions and hers.
Hello, Amanda. This is Margaret. I just feel that at my age, because I'm over 80, travel insurance is just far too expensive. So I'm questioning whether I renew my passport. Maybe not. I just feel I don't want to ever hop on an aeroplane again. So I think in 2025, I'll be travelling all over Australia by train. Merry Christmas, Amanda, and a Happy New Year.
Thank you, Margaret, and Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you too and to everyone. And I know that in Australia we have some absolutely incredible train journeys, which I also hope to get on one day. So, won't be 2025, I don't think, but sometime in the future. So, that is it for the Thoughtful Travel podcast for 2024. Looking onwards and upwards to a fantastic year of thoughtful travel in 2025. I will leave links in the show notes to a bunch of those articles which I mentioned. So there's some interesting reading about places to go and travel trends for 2025. Of course, the show notes for this episode, being episode 330, they will be at notaballerina.com/330. Do come along and chat with us in one of our groups. I have the Facebook group for Thoughtful Travellers and the LinkedIn group for Thoughtful Travellers. Just searching for those names in either platform should find you the spot you need to be. But if not, just have a look in the show notes. Don't forget as well, I am finally relaunching my Thoughtful Travellers newsletter at Substack, and you can sign up for that at thoughtfultravel.substack.com. Wishing you a very, very thoughtful and happy season over the holidays, and best of all, a very thoughtful travelling year in 2025. I look forward to sharing lots of fun with you and lots of thoughtfulness as well. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.